Merry meet everyone. A few days ago in our Body Mind Witchcraft group, I asked the question, what is your number one question about shadow work and energy work? And so I am here today answering all the questions that people left for me, as well as any others that people have while they're live. So welcome, I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. This is a special episode, special Q&A, answering people's questions about shadow work and energy work. So if you are joining me live, you can leave other questions here in the chat. I'll periodically be going through it and answering those as well as the ones that were sent to me. If you're watching this back later on YouTube, you can also leave questions there. I'll come through later and answer those. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. If you like anything you hear during this video, make sure to leave a heart or a thumbs up, and that way we make sure this gets into the feed of more people. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in, just saying hi to those who are joining us. And I'm going to start with the first question on my list here. So this one is actually sent to me pretty much every round. I get this question a lot, and I thought I would start with it because it's just the basics. What is shadow work and what is the shadow? So shadow work is part of Jungian individuation theory. And so let's start by talking about what the shadow is. The shadow is a part of us. It forms in two different ways. It's essentially all of the unconscious things that go underneath the surface that we're not aware of in our day-to-day life. So it can actually form in two different ways. And I always preface this that it is important to remember that both the ways that this form are natural. So, on one hand, the shadow is all of the aspects that we have kept repressed or suppressed. So, the things that we were taught by society, by our parents, by the church, by friends, by the school, things that we were taught were not right, right? They were not good. They were not good to be a good person. We don't want to have these qualities in us. So those things quickly get repressed if we're expected to survive and live in the society where there are all these rules. And so we we will not really know what is going on down there. So there will be unconscious motivations. So you'll notice that there are things that you're doing, you're not aware of why you're doing them. Anytime you ask yourself, why am I doing that? That's a good indication that there's a shadow aspect underneath it. Now, the second way that the shadow is formed is it's actually a much more creative process. Like some people will call this the light aspect of the shadow. So this is all the roles and the hats that people tried on when they were younger. And this can be when you're a little kid, but this would also be when you're an adult. But just all the things that you tried that you never actually realized, right? That you never fulfilled. So those also remain in your shadow, and this is like this is untapped creative energy that we can get into. So the reality though is that all this stuff that's underneath us, all these shadow aspects that we have, they're controlling our thoughts, they're controlling our actions, from the unconscious. And so we're not aware that that is going on. And so in shadow work, what we do is we attempt to go down, excavate down into the unconscious and recover these pieces, acknowledge them. Some of them may not even be ours. They may be things that we have acquired through ancestral lines. They could be things that we picked up from parents. And I'll give an example later. For example, I have this great amount of fear that I know is actually coming from my mother and from her line, my grandmother, and then beyond that. So Carl Jung, the godfather of shadow work, he said that unless we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. And so that's the idea here, is that unless we go in and we do something about this, it's going to feel like we're driven by some kind of unconscious motivation. Now, we may not think that, may not process that intellectually, but we will feel as though things are being done to us. Okay, so that's a number one reason or number one way to know that there's something there to work on, is when it feels like something's being done to you, or there's repetitive patterns that you seem to always be falling into, or you just don't have an explanation for why you think or do a certain thing. Now, some people say the shadow work is the most authentic path to enlightenment. I think I'm always cautious about words like the most. I think that it is a very accessible path towards enlightenment. I don't believe it's the only one, but it is very accessible, and it is a way that we absolutely can reach enlightenment if we do this kind of work. I'll talk about this later. There's a question later on that kind of spirals back, and we'll address that as well. Now, ultimately, the goal of shadow work is to integrate all of those shadow aspects, so all that stuff we're rejecting, to integrate that and to connect to our higher self. So, if you're somebody who's wanted to connect to the higher self but didn't know how, this is a pathway that can get you there. Okay, so that is what is the shadow and what is shadow work. So that kind of opens this up for some deeper questions about shadow work. So as everybody's joining me, just so you know, this is a Q&A on shadow work and energy work. So feel free to put questions in the chat. I'm going through periodically and I'll be answering those as well as the ones that were sent to me earlier. And just saying hi, I see Anthony in the chat. Hi, everybody. Good to see you guys. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. So this one came from Jennifer, and she said, "What is the first thing one can do to begin shadow work?" And this will actually lead into another question after that as well. Okay, so she says, "What is the first thing that someone can do to begin shadow work?" So I think that the first thing is that you have to decide to begin. It's not really, it's something that you can dabble in. Like anything in life, you can dabble in it, right? But you're not really ever going to get really good at something or make a lot of progress in something unless we commit to it. So I think the first step for people is to kind of make that conscious decision that now is the time to do this kind of work. So if you get drawn to groups like this, Body Mind Witchcraft, if you're either in the Facebook group or you watch our YouTube videos, we already know that you're being pulled here, right? You're already being called. So you're already on the pathway to begin. Now, I think that the first thing after that, once you decide to begin, is that you've got to let go of your fears around it, and you've got to let go of your preconceived notions. So some people have fears, and some of these fears have to do with the fact that they don't know what shadow work is. So one question that I get asked is shadow work evil? Sometimes people will ask that. Is it dark witchcraft? It depends on your definition of dark witchcraft, I guess. So it's darker in the way that we're digging deep into the unconscious. We're often working at the dark moon. We're working with dark deities a lot of the time. So it all depends on the definition of dark. It is not evil. It's not it's not doing anything to people against their will. It's all really personal work that we each do, though you'll find that there are places where you can kind of do that work with other people. But letting go of those kind of preconceived notions is important, and then letting go of your fears. Some people are very fearful of what the shadow contains, and we should normalize that because the fear is relevant. The stuff that's underneath in your unconscious is unpleasant. You put it there at some point to survive. You put it there in order to go about life and live in this world that we chose to incarnate into. So we put it there for a reason. But if we want to become whole, if we want to integrate ourselves, if we want to move towards that enlightened path, we've got to get in at some point and we got to work with this stuff. So letting go of that fear, being in a place where you're very supported. So I would recommend, especially if people know that they have a lot of trauma, do the shadow work path. You could do this kind of work in a group like ours, but you can also in tandem be working with a therapist. So it's always good to have somebody that you can fall back to talk to when things when things start to get a little intense. Um, but so letting go of those fears, making sure you have a lot of support, that would be a way to start. And then as far as I think what the question is also asking is, what would you do? So the number one thing that we often recommend people do is look at their triggers. The triggers are the things that you are willing to experience. They're the things that you are willing to work on. So it's essentially like your unconscious is telling you, or the universe and your unconscious is telling you, this is an aspect of you that has the ability to heal right now. So there's some things that are so buried down so deep that we're not even going to get triggered by them. We're not even going to get, there's nothing that's going to even nudge us towards that until probably later once we've done more work. But anytime that you're getting triggered, anytime that you're getting irked or annoyed or irritated by people or situations or things around you, it's a place to start looking. What's going on underneath the surface? Is there more here? It's best if we can kind of divorce it from the external. So it doesn't mean that we're saying that all of the things that people do to us are okay. That's not what we're saying. But we're not going to be able to do the work on ourselves if we continue to focus on the external thing, the external person, the external situation. So instead, what we do is turn the mirror back around on ourselves and we say to ourselves, well, what could this situation, what could this person, what could this have to teach me? What could it be telling me? What is it like rubbing against down in my shadow self? What is trying to emerge from the depths of the unconscious in this situation? So that would be the first thing I would do, is kind of look at the triggers. And then if you want to go a little bit further, I would start looking for some shadow work prompts. So you can find these anywhere online, like just Google what are some good shadow work prompts. If you're here in our Body Mind Witchcraft group, I put prompts up all the time. I put even deeper ones in our Shadow Seekers membership group for people to work on every week. But you can find these prompts. There will be hundreds, and I would find a couple that resonate with you. They're not all gonna resonate. So find a couple that you feel kind of drawn to, and then it's up to you what you do next. So some people will journal, right? So they'll just journal on the prompt. If you're someone who likes journaling, you would try that. I'm not really a huge journaling person. I think it has to do with the fact that I write so much. So writing even more, it's never really resonated with me. So for me, I actually like to take the prompts and I do what Jung called active imagination. It's a type of meditative meditation. It's not quite what you would think. You get into kind of a light meditative state and then you begin contemplating the prompt. Now, I like to do it by getting into very relaxed positions, like if you've ever tried yin yoga. It's not what people typically think of as yoga, but you find um, these very interesting positions that are meant to kind of open up parts of the body. And you get into those, you hold this pose for 3 to 5 minutes. Most of them are lying down, right? So you're just getting very relaxed. As the body relaxes more, the ability to contemplate these thoughts gets more pronounced. So some people find a lot of usefulness in doing something like that. So that's what I like to do. Or I'll take a prompt and I'll go out walking or hiking like right around dusk. And I'm going to talk a little bit about later in a question about timing of shadow work and kind of the cycles of energy and how that complements what we're doing. But know that dusk is a very good time for shadow work. So I really like to walk or hike during that time and I contemplate these thoughts. And I have solved some pretty big problems in my life just doing that technique. But you can also get down into the unconscious and get some access into your shadow self that way as well. And then the third thing I guess I would say, as far as where to begin, is to look for the places in your life where you say, I don't know why I do that, but here I am, right? I don't know why I think that. So it's all of those things where you say that I don't know why, immediately ding, ding, ding. That is the red flag that goes up. That's a place for some shadow work. So just saying hi to others who are joining us. Hi, I see Pamela's here. Carla made it. Hi, Carla. Melinda's here. Brenda's here. So again, I'm going through questions that were sent to me earlier this week. But if you have other questions about shadow work, energy work, witchcraft, put them in the chat and I'll be answering those as well. Okay, so next question. This one is from Junior, and he's asking about timing. And the next question from Rebecca, we have two kind of back to back, and they're both about timing. So we're going to talk about them together, okay? So Junior said, when do I begin? And then he said, I did my first shadow work spell a few full moons ago, and my life has changed for the better. So that, first of all, congratulations. That is something that many people will experience with their first kind of shadow work. They can experience some pretty profound things. So that's a big deal. And then that's an impetus to go further with the work, which is why the question's being asked. So I guess my answer to this question is any time is okay to begin. You begin when you want to begin. You're already here. So just based on what you said, it sounds like you've already begun. My best advice, really, for anybody is to make this a regular practice. So, like I said in the beginning, you can dabble in anything in your life, right? But you know the reality of dabbling. It's we don't really fully immerse ourselves in it. We don't get the benefits we get than as to when we dig deeper into it, right? When we fully commit to it. So, I would make it a regular practice, and so perhaps start once a month if you want. So, like I noticed you said that you had done some kind of a shadow work spell at the full moon. So, what you could do is you could make that a practice every full moon. You're going to do another spell like that or some kind of a working. Now, you could also do it weekly. If you think once a month isn't enough and you're really wanting to get in more, then I would do it weekly. And perhaps what you would do is you would pick a prompt every week, and then that would be your work. And then what you could do is you could then add on that shadow work ritual once a month whenever you wanted to do it, whether you did it at the full moon, or you're going to see in the next question, I'm going to talk a lot about the dark moon as well. But really, to answer your question, there isn't a good time, there isn't a right time to start. The time to start is the time that you're called here. So I generally find that when people start getting called to this group, Body Mind Witchcraft, or to our YouTube page, or to our mailing list, they're on the path. They're getting the kind of that tapping on the shoulder. This is the kind of work that that you're open to doing. So the time to start is right now. You're here, so let's go, right? So that leads us into Rebecca's question, where she's asking more specifically about the moon, but I'm going to add on some information also about just like energy, cyclical in the year, the wheel of the year as well. Okay, so she says, what moon phase is best for this kind of work? So I think the answer to this is that it really depends on the person because everybody's energy cycles a little bit differently. Okay, so during this question, I'll tell you how to figure out how your energy is cycling. But that would be my first answer. This is gonna be a different answer for everybody. So what I'm gonna answer is for the majority of people, and then we're going to talk about how you'll figure out what your energy cycle is like. So the majority of people are going to find that they have more activated energy during the waxing moon and they have more receptive energy during the waning moon. And so for that reason, waxing moon is very good for what we call priming activities. So priming activities are activities that we pair with shadow work, and they're designed to move energy through the body. Now, I'm going to talk more about this in another question in just a little bit, where someone was asking about energy work. But just know that these priming activities, what they do is they move a bunch of energy through your body so that we don't have all this stuck and stagnant energy in the body that's kind of clogging up the energy channels. And once those energy channels are clear, what we find is that when we move into the waning half of the cycle, or that second half where we're in that more receptive space, we feel more like turning inward. That's always the invitation. Anytime that you feel like turning inward, that's a good indication of what part of the cycle you're in. Okay, so when you start to feel that receptive energy, you start to feel like I'm receiving things more, or I don't want to be around people as much, for the next couple of days, and I really want to turn inward. That would be the indication that you're ready for what we would call prompting. So prompting activities, which are often done during the waning moon, can be like those journal prompts, or going in and doing active imagination, or doing things that are going to facilitate shadow work, that they're going to help bring things out of the unconscious. And then what we can do is we can follow that up with some kind of a releasing ritual around the dark moon. That's my favorite time to do it. And if you were following that kind of cycle where you're in the waxing period and you're kind of moving energy through your body, and then you get to the full moon, right? And then you come down into the waning half of the cycle, you begin kind of doing some of those prompting exercises to just kind of prompt the shadow work out of you, right? To bring aspects of your shadow up out of the unconscious. And then you get down to the dark moon, and then you're ready to kind of let go. of anything that you're holding on to that's not going to serve you as you move into the next cycle. So that's personally how I kind of cycle through the energy. But what I notice is that my energy shifts sometimes. And so sometimes I'll feel more receptive during the waxing half of the cycle. And I know that there's people who experience that as well. So one of the things that you can do is track your own energy. So like I mentioned earlier, is that when you start to feel like turning inward, you'll immediately know you're in that more receptive phase. But let's say you don't get that prompt, like you don't get that trigger, right? Or you don't get that kind of inclination. So what I would do is I would start tracking the lunar cycles, and I would look at a couple of things. So I would look at what moon phase it is, and there's many apps that can tell you what moon phase it is. You could just Google what moon phase is it right now. And so I would get a little journal or something where you're going to write this down, and in every day or most days you'll write down what phase of the moon it is. And then you're going to write down how you feel energetically, how you feel physically, how you feel emotionally, and how you feel spiritually. Okay? And then you're going to track that over a couple of months, because the first month isn't usually enough data to tell us much. But if we track it over 2, 3, 4 months, you're going to start to see patterns. And you're going to begin to see when you're more receptive. When do you feel like your energy is withdrawing? And that's when you will do your prompting or your shadow work, right? And when do you feel that your energy is more activating? That's when you're going to try to do your energy work. Now, the other thing you can do is you can look at just simply the cycles of the year as well. So if you look at the wheel of the year, we're actually in the perfect time for shadow work right now, because we're past Samhain. We're almost to the, the darkest, longest night of the year, which is the winter solstice. And so we're already in that. The winter time is a very good time for shadow work because it has energy that's similar to the waning moon, specifically to the waning crescent moon. So that's something to also think about yearly versus the monthly cycles. Okay, so I hope that helped and answered the question of what phase of the moon to do this kind of work. Okay, so next up, Ashley asked about pairing shadow work with energy work. So she said, why do you suggest pairing shadow work with energy work? And I suggest that a lot. So let me answer this one, and then I'll go in the chat and I'll see if there's some questions to take there, and then we'll get back to these ones. So why do we suggest pairing energy with shadow work? Well, a couple of different answers. One is that we all experience trauma. We've all experienced it, some of us to a greater degree than others, but we've all experienced it. And there's new research that's coming out that is showing us that trauma actually is being held in our body, particularly in the fascia of the body. The fascia is it basically coats your muscles, and it can store this energy essentially. Now, we have connections between the energetic body and the physical body. And what that means is that you can't do something to one and not affect the other. So when we have disruptions of the energetic body, we're almost immediately going to have disruptions of the physical body. And when we have disruptions of the physical body, you better believe that you have disruptions of the energetic body. Okay, so what that means is anywhere in the body where we have aches and pains, if we're having digestive problems, if we're having breathing problems, I have asthma, things like that. These are all pointing us towards the energetic centers that are also compromised. And what that means is we can actually work to heal ourselves physically, but if we add on the energetic healing too, we can accelerate the healing process. So these connections, they're always there. And what the energy work will do for us is that energy gets stuck and stagnant in the body, in the places where we're holding it, right? So let's say we're holding trauma from childhood, perhaps, and some people hold it in the hips, and some people hold it in the heart, and some people it's in the throat. Some people it's in the shoulders, right? It can be in the feet. It can be anywhere in your body. And if you tap in and you start to kind of ask your body where it is, it will tell you. Don't question it. Just it will often just pop into your head. Where is my trauma being held? And just listen for the first thing that comes up. Now, if we start to move that energy, that stuck and stagnant energy, what that means is that we have more optimal energy flowing through the body. So what we can do is we can do breath work. We can do mantras. So mantras are contrary to what people think, most of what we do here in the West are affirmations. So if it's in like English and you're saying, I embrace my inner child, that's usually, we would consider that probably an affirmation, not a mantra. Mantras are usually, in particular, in the Sanskrit language, that's one language that they're often written in because it's a vibrational language. And what that language does is when we, or what those mantras do is when we utter them, not only is there meaning in the words that are being said, but there's an energetic change that's happening in the body. So that's another way that we move energy, through mantras, through mudras, which are hand gestures. So sometimes people, when they're meditating, they go into the Gaya mudra. So this is just where you take the ring finger to the thumb and you place that on your lap like that. So these mudras will actually change energy as well. So here's one for the heart chakra. So you basically take the palm of your right hand and place it against the back of the left hand. And then you just sort of interlace the thumbs, let the fingers spread out like this. This is called the Garuda mudra. It's named after Garuda, the eagle god of the Hindu pantheon. And you can place it here on your heart, and this will literally change the energy of your heart chakra when we do these mudras. And then other things we can do is Kundalini energy exercises. So these are quick and repetitive movements that are designed to move large amounts of energy through the body. So typically, the blockages most of us have are in the lower chakras, particularly in the root, the sacral chakra, and the solar plexus, though a lot carry it in the heart and a lot have it in the throat as well. And so if we work to move the energy through those parts of the body, what that means is that we open up the energy channels so our energy flows better up into the third eye, the crown, and this is our more spiritual set of chakras. So consequently, what we'll find is that our shadow work becomes easier when we do our energy work, and that will accelerate the healing process. So this is why we say pair energy work with shadow work. Okay, so hope that helped, Ashley. All right, so I'm going to see in the chat here. So Carla had asked how to be consistent. Okay, so how to be consistent, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to make the commitment to be consistent. So it's like anything in life, right? If you want to start a better way of eating, if you want to start an exercise regime, if you want to start a spiritual practice, you have to make the commitment to do it. And so what I recommend that people do, so here's what I think is the number one thing that gets in people's way of consistency, is that they think that what they have to do is really huge and really big and it's overwhelming and they don't know how to do it, and so maybe they start and then they quickly lose energy and they can't do it anymore. But what the reality is even if you do 5 to 10 minutes of some kind of a spiritual practice a day, you move everything forward a step every single day. And you don't have to do it every day. I'm like I'm not about extremes. I work with, some of you know, I work with students. Most of my students have learning differences, and they will often come in and they have these really big aspirations, like, I'm going to study for the SAT 2 hours a day every day. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to fail, right? You're going to not do that. So set up a practice that you can do. And sometimes that's just 5 minutes in the bathroom. Close the door and stay in there 5 minutes extra and do a little breathing. Or think about a shadow work prompt while you're brushing your teeth. Or light a candle and do 3 minutes of candle gazing and then pull an oracle card or a tarot card. The idea here for consistency is that you have to make it consistent, but make it bite-sized so you can do it. Don't say, I'm going to do 2 hours. This is what I do. This is what I've learned from my own mistakes. In a perfect world, I would practice for 3 hours a day if I could. And I just simply don't have the time, because I work like 60 to 80 hours a week between my 2 jobs. And so what I have found, though, is that rather than beat myself up over the fact that I couldn't do the 2 or 3 hours, I started doing these bite-sized practices and I stayed consistent. And so do it, you don't have to say every day, do it most days. That's the commitment you're going to make. I'm going to do 5 minutes most days, and then try to stick to it, and then be accountable in groups. Like you're in Shadow Seekers, Carla, so be accountable to us. Tell us in the group, I did my 5 minutes today, or I'm at the end of week 1 and I did it 3 times. And people will come out and congratulate you, and it can also feel good to have that kind of support. And if you're not in Shadow Seekers, you guys can still do this, but find someone who will support you, who will say good job, you know. And but the key to consistency is finding an amount of time that is realistic for you and doing it as doing it on most days. Okay, so I hope that helps. I am coming out. This is like a work in progress because I've had this written for like probably almost 2 years at this point. But I have this very small mini course coming out that I'm going to sell at a very, very low price because I want as many people to take advantage of it as they can. But what it does is it sets this whole thing up for you. It's got a calendar, it's got ways to keep you consistent, and it has videos of 5 minute to 10 minute practices that people can do. You can do one, or you can stack them on top of each other and make longer practices. But I get asked this question a lot, so I really want to make this little mini practice course for people. So that will be coming out hopefully sooner than later, hopefully in the spring. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question here, and then I'll go back to the chat. I'll just kind of go back and forth here for a bit. So Kim said, have you heard of having to retrieve pieces of your spirit? She said, what would be the sign of such a thing, and what would you do about it? Would this relate to shadow work at all? Okay, so I think what she's asking about is soul retrieval. So soul retrieval is an elementary shamanic practice, and I'm just going to preface this with, I am not an expert on that at all. I am an expert on shadow work, but not on that. But I'll give you my thoughts on it, and then I'm going to give you a resource to look into, and I'll let you know that I actually think that shadow work and soul retrieval are very, very similar, at least that they have a similar end goal. So during soul retrieval, we look for basically pieces of the self that are lost. Okay, so that's right. That's the definition of shadow work as well. We look for pieces of the self that are lost. During our trauma, there are the idea behind soul retrieval is during our trauma, there are difficult parts of the true self that are kind of severed off. And in some ways, they're put there that this happens because it is a way to survive, to save us, or these pieces are just too uncomfortable to look at, and so they get kind of severed, right? And this is in order to survive, in order to avoid pain. Now, during soul retrieval, people are helped through the process of reintegrating the lost parts of their selves, which helps make them whole again. So if you listen to this whole definition, which you notice, anybody who's been doing shadow work, you'll notice that it's a very similar definition and a very similar process. But while they do have the same kind of end goal, the techniques are different, and that's where they would vary. So to do soul retrieval, a lot of times you'll be working in a kind of a shamanic practice. Like I would recommend finding someone who specializes in that if that's what you're interested in. But just know they do have a similar end result, which means if you're already doing shadow work, I don't necessarily know that people have to add that on top of it. It's two pathways towards the same place. So you want to find the pathway that makes the most sense for you. But I definitely would, if it seems like that's the path you want to take, I would find someone who specializes in that. Now, if you want to come at it from a perspective of a witch, I recommend his books all the time, but here's another Christopher Penczak book. This is The Temple of Shamanic Witchcraft. This book is meant to be about number 3 in the series. It starts with the outer temple and the inner temple. This is the third one. But he goes in and he talks more about some of these soul retrieval processes and techniques from the perspective of a witch. Okay, so you might want to pick that up if you're interested in it. And hope that helps answer the question. But like I said, similar end goal to both processes, but the techniques will be a little bit different. Okay, I'm going to go back into the chat and I'm going to grab a question here. Melinda says, what are some things for a witch to do on their birthday? That's an interesting question. So do you have a birthday coming up soon? Probably, or maybe you know someone who's got one coming up. It's a good question. What do I do as a witch on my birthday? I think that as a witch, I would do especially as a witch who's doing shadow work, I would try to make sure that whatever I do on my birthday is what I want to do on my birthday. Because sometimes what happens is that other people come in and they have the expectations that they kind of put on top of everything of what they think you should do for your birthday or what they want to do for your birthday. So just make sure that whatever you do, you're doing it because you want to do it. But one thing you can do, I think, is fun, is getting you can get your astrological chart read for the next year. And that would be kind of neat on your birthday. So basically what it does is takes kind of a snapshot of like what can you expect in the next year of your life. And a lot of people like to do that on their birthdays. So that would be kind of fun. If you like rituals, do a ritual, go out to like a place that you really love and do a little ritual there. Maybe connect to your deities or your spirit guides and just ask them to kind of celebrate with you and give you an idea of what's coming up in the next year, as we cross through over into the next year. But that would be my thought. I'd probably get my chart read and see if I could see the snapshot of next year or this coming year. I see June said hi. I got some other people coming in here. Sabrina, hi everybody. And Melinda said tomorrow it's her birthday and it will be the first one as a witch. Yeah, very cool. So what you could do is you could do a little ritual. I don't know if you've ever done a dedication ritual yet. A lot of times people will do that on new moons. You're in the waning part of the cycle right now. You could do anything, but you could do a little ritual, like a little dedication ritual. So perhaps if you have a deity that you are dedicating to, do something for them, put a little offering out, and just kind of commune with them and be there with them. And people are saying happy birthday, Melinda. Um, okay, so I'm going to go to another question that I was sent, and then I'll go back to the chat. Let's see, we did this one. All right, this next one's from JD. And JD said, how do you forgive and move past things you're ashamed of, like the really deep stuff that is the root of something? That is the crux of shadow work. That is shadow work for you, right? So, how do we move past the difficult stuff, which is the really deep stuff that is at the root of it all? All right. So, my answer is an answer that people may not want to hear, but the answer to this really is time. It's time. It takes time. So the deep stuff isn't something that we are going to be able to get rid of in a month. A little dabbling of shadow work. It can take years to get to start to actually really process some of this, and that can be the disturbing part for people. Is like, I'm not saying this specifically not saying this specifically to JD or anybody, but we do live in a culture where we really love instant gratification and we really love quick fixes. And even when I was starting this business and I was starting to create my Shadow Seekers group, I got a lot of help from like other business groups, business mentors, and things like that. And they all talk about like quick wins and quick fixes. I'm like, that doesn't really apply here. Like, we can do some quick things, like energy work, for example, is really fast. Like, you start to do breath work and you will feel almost immediate difference in your body and in your mind and in your emotions. But when it comes to this deeper stuff, this is going to take us some time. So I think the number one thing I would say about this question is you do have to take the time. It's cycle after cycle after cycle of this. Now, one thing I would recommend is trying to ritualize the process, because that can help a lot. So the idea with ritualizing it, and so I'll give you a little idea of like what I do and what I call a generic kind of dark moon ritual, is you can light some candles, call deities if you want. You don't have to work with deities in this at all, but if you want, you can call them in. And then what I do is I take paper and I write on the paper all the things that I would like to let go of. And sometimes, cycle after cycle, this is the same stuff over and over and over again every month. But what is happening is each time we're letting go of a little bit of it, a little bit of it, a little bit of it, right? We're releasing a little bit each dark moon until eventually it doesn't have the emotional charge that it once had. So the it will take multiple cycles in order to kind of do something like that if we really hope to move past this. The idea we really want to do with our shadow work is acknowledging even the parts of you that you're ashamed of, even the things that you're ashamed of, they're part of you. And the problem is that we snap them off, right? We push them into the unconscious and we don't want to think about them, but they're us. And so we have to acknowledge it, turn that back around, acknowledge it. And once we do, we may notice that when we start to acknowledge it, we immediately recoil. And you got to fight that urge to recoil. Just push inward. This is a part of me, right? No matter what, this is a part of me. But over time, what you're going to find, if you do this cycle after cycle and you do that little releasing ritual I mentioned, cycle after cycle, you're going to notice that you don't recoil as much. You're going to notice that it's easier to acknowledge these pieces. And I think another important thing is to realize that you're here ultimately, everybody incarnated here for one reason. And that one reason is to move your soul progress forward. Okay, so whether people want to believe that or not, that's the number one reason we're all here. So your shame is what will hold you back. Your negative energy, your negative emotions, your inability to look at the aspects you have cracked off from yourself, that's what will hold you back. But what will move you forward towards your enlightenment is facing all this stuff. So we just do it one step at a time. We manage our expectations. We know when we go in, this may be years to get through this, but we do it a little at a time. So by acknowledging it as a part of yourself and then kind of working through ritual to let go of the shame or whatever negative emotions are coming up, a little by little by little, you'll get through it. So that would be my best advice for that question. Okay, I'm going back into the chat. Let's see what else we've got here. Melinda said she's learned something about herself this cycle. She said the roughest days mentally and energetically are when the moon is in Taurus. Interesting. And she said, ironically, this is her daughter's sun sign. Yeah, that's interesting, right? So that also, it would be important to kind of look at that energy of Taurus, that Taurian energy, and sort of ask yourself, why is that energy difficult for you? So if your birthday is tomorrow, that would make you a Sagittarius, right? So you're a fire sign. So you're having a little bit of resistance, or feeling kind of that difficult time coming up when the moon is in an earth sign. So I would sort of explore what is going on there. Fire and earth, they have very opposite kind of energies in a lot of ways. So it could be that when we kind of brush up against something that is rough or irritates us, it's an aspect of us that perhaps we need to embody more earth. Maybe we need to embody more of that energy, or it's kind of coming up against something else inside of us. But that's why you're kind of experiencing that roughness of the energy. I see Melissa she said to make it a goal, to make this kind of work a goal, do a 5-minute practice. She does 5-minute thank you every day, and then once you do it enough, it will become a habit. Exactly. So you just have to make it a small little practice, but you do it enough. Do it on most days, and you'll make it a practice. Okay. Let's see here. I'll come back to the chat in a second. This is a question from Melinda that she sent earlier. This is a really good one. Okay. So because I know that other people are experiencing this. So she said, I feel like a totally different person now that I'm on this path. I'm getting the impression that some very important people in my life liked things the way they were before I started this journey. She said, I thought they'd be happy about it, but they're not. And so I'm a little confused. Okay, so very good question, and you are not alone. Okay, this is not uncommon, unfortunately, and you would think that people would be happy for us as we start to make positive changes in our lives. But the reality is that it will typically threaten their own shadows when we're bringing ours out into the light. Okay, so just think about it. Remember, the shadow is down underneath the unconscious for a reason. It's because people don't want to deal with it. So as you start to drag yours out, other people start to look around and they're like, they probably don't even consciously think this, but there's a part of them that's like, I should be doing that kind of work too. So that can sometimes be part of the reason. This is unrelated, but I think that this analogy fits here. So I've been vegetarian and vegan. I was a vegetarian when I was 16. I started when I was 16. And I am not one of those people, like probably, I may have never even mentioned it to anybody on here. You may not even know that. I don't talk about it a lot. I'm not somebody who's trying to convert people all the time. But, but I've noticed through all these years of being a vegetarian, I will get attacked sometimes at places by people just because I ate vegetarian food. In fact, my friend who's a vegetarian, her uncle told her she's going to hell because she's a vegetarian. So it's just people have like, I think what it does, why do people get so angry at certain things? I think it just rubs something in them a little bit. So as people are getting angry about vegetarianism, it's just rubbing something in them that kind of questions whether they should do it or not. That's my opinion on that. But as far as like the shadow work, same kind of mechanism here. So people start to see you doing the work, and unconsciously it sort of just kind of rubs them. It rubs that part of them that feels like they should be doing it too. It rubs them kind of the wrong way. Now, the other side of this is that people liked it better the way we were before because they got comfortable and because we're all in this sort of the system that fit. So your position in the system was the way that you were, and now you're a different way, and now you don't fit in the system quite the same way. And so that can also kind of irritate people, and that can be what's causing them to not be so happy for your journey. So I think that what you need to ask yourself, first of all, is who the people are, because if they're people who are, like you said, they're very important people. So I'm going to assume they're people like who are going to be staying in your life. These aren't just like peripheral friends that kind of come and go. So you I think that one of the best things I recommend is taking kind of comfort and solace in the fact that there are other people on the path with you. You're in Shadow Seekers, so you have us. You've got the bigger Body Mind Witchcraft group, but you also have our smaller Shadow Seekers group. So take comfort and find camaraderie there. Other people are going through the same things as well. But also know that when a door closes, it's a cliche statement, when one door closes, another one opens, right? But there is a big reality to it. When I look back on my life and I see how different I am than I was just a few years ago. I've changed a lot. And so there are people in my life that really aren't here anymore. There's friends that I had that served a purpose at one point in the past, and the relationship doesn't make as much sense anymore. And that can be very sad, right? We think back to those good memories and we feel bad about that. But it really is true that when a door opens and we kind of like let go of certain people in our lives, new ones come in to replace them and to fill us up. And I was just hiking in Sedona a week ago, and I met someone who was lost on a trail. And through talking to her, I went to help her find this vortex she was looking for. And through talking to her, we have this insane amount of synchronicities about us. In fact, we both live in LA, and so we exchanged phone numbers, and now here's a new friend. So it's just very interesting, and then she's a spiritual friend because she was there for a spiritual reason. So it's hard. Just know that you're not alone. There's not really an easy answer to it. Just trust in your own process. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, the number one reason we're all incarnated here is for our own spiritual evolution, not other people's. So your path is this path. This is the one you're on. And so people will learn how to adapt to the new you, or they won't learn how to adapt to the new you. But the universe will bring other people toward you who are on that same vibration as well. So I hope that helped. Okay, let's see here. I'm going back into the chat, and then I just have a couple more to answer here. So Anthony said, how many offerings to a guide so they will continue to help, or just whatever I feel to do it, or whenever I feel to do it? Yeah, don't. And then you said, you don't want Lilith to be mad. So don't worry. Okay, so I think that where some of that fear comes from in us comes from the Abrahamic religions, right? Like anybody who was raised Christian, and even if you weren't raised Christian, you're here in the collective. And if you live in the United States, this is a place where the predominant religion is Christianity. And so the idea in the Bible is that it's a God who is very, right? He's like slaying people who don't give him the right offerings, right? So we pick up that in the collective. But the reality is that most of these deities, the deities that I've worked with, I've never experienced anything like that kind of energy. The deities are very much um, so receptive because they want to be connected to, right? Especially deities who are not the Abrahamic ones, right? When they got these old gods got replaced by this new god, and they get kind of pushed off into the fringes. Now there's still many of us who keep that worship alive and that honoring alive, but they're happy just to have us there working with them, to have the connection that we're making with them. So don't fear that you're not giving enough. You know, whatever you feel called to give. I have an altar set up here for Ganesha and Lakshmi. I just keep it up at all times. On the full moon, I work with both of them, and then on the new moon, a dark moon, I work with Ganesha and I work with Kali. Then, so but I wouldn't worry about how many offerings you have to give. Just give what you feel called to. Set up an altar, and that's good. And the fact that you're working with her, you work with her a lot because I see you post on here. You're doing a good job. She's not going to be mad at you. Just give what you can from your heart, and just the fact that you're connecting to her is enough. Okay, let me see what else is here. Um, okay. Carla said, "Why are we here again?" Okay, so the number one reason we're here is to move the spiritual evolution forward. Move the spiritual evolution forward. Many people don't realize that, and they'll go through their whole life and not kind of ever do any work. But that's generally the reason that we're here. We're trying to move our pathway forward. That's why we incarnate here. Some people say that the Earth School is the hardest school to be a student at. I don't know. I don't remember other places to incarnate, only this one. But yeah, incarnating here in this time and place, this is hard. We came here for a reason, but we came here in a place that is so full of pain and darkness. But we came here so that we could work through that and we could evolve spiritually and emotionally. So, in some ways, yeah, it's tough to be here, but this is the place to be in order to work through what we need to do to evolve to the next place, to the next higher level that we're headed towards. Okay, so here's a question from Sonia. She said, "How do I introduce shadow work to a child so they can understand it?" This is a good question. I've never been asked this, and so I actually had to think about this one for a little bit. So my first reaction to it was Carl Jung, who coined the word shadow work. And if you kind of look back at anything that's kind of sort of similar to shadow work, so like we were talking about, like shamanic self-retrieval, which might even be older than shadow work, or even like I've talked before about the myth of Anana, which is essentially going down into the unconscious to face the shadow. These were always works that were done by adults. So my first thought and reaction was, well, shadow work's not really for children. So how would we explain it to them so that they could understand something that's not actually really for them? And so Jung believed that people would go through this process where they would get ready to integrate all aspects of the self around their 40s, 50s. Some people come earlier. I've noticed people nowadays kind of coming to the path earlier. Some people come to the path in their 60s and in their 70s. It doesn't really matter when you come, but he always believed it was adults. So my answer to this is, like, I think it would depend on how old the child is. I work with kids. My youngest child that I work with in my practice is in 8th grade. And so sometimes the kids have asked me what I do, what's my other business. And so if a kid was really little, I would probably say it's healing work. It's healing work that we're doing. Now, one thing that children probably can relate to is the idea of like displaced emotions. So if a child can relate to the idea of displaced anger, like, right, they're angry at something else that's happened. Like maybe they're angry at a kid at school, but they take it out on mom, or they take it out on dad, or the dog, or the cat, or something like that. So kids can usually relate to displaced anger especially, but displaced energy of any kind. And so if they can relate to that, then you can talk about how shadow work is us kind of getting in and understanding those underlying motivations so that we're not displacing our emotions. So that might be something they would relate to. Another thing that you could say to a kid is that shadow work is taking like all the hurts that we've experienced that we didn't fully process, and then that became repressed or suppressed in the unconscious, taking those and bringing them out to the surface in order to heal them. But they also might relate to that light aspect of the shadow as well, because that's all the hats and the roles that we took on that we didn't actually move forward with our lives. So children can often relate to that too, because there's things that they have tried that they didn't progress in and they kind of stopped doing. And so that's one aspect of shadow work, is digging down and finding all of those as well. But I think ultimately, I generally explain it to the students I work with as it's healing work, where we're kind of going in and we're looking at the underlying reasons why we do things. And a lot of those have to do with the trauma and the hurts and the pains that we've experienced, and we're healing those along the way. All right, so I hope that helps. And so he said her kiddo is a sun sign and she's water. Yeah. So sometimes those signs, like romantic relationships, they don't always work, but they can work really well in parent and child. Or like my best friend is a water sign, and I'm a sun sign. So sometimes those energies work. Sometimes but they do. They're very different, so they kind of rub up against each other at times. Um, Okay. All right. I'm going back. I think I have one more here. I think I have one more that someone left me. Let's make sure I got everybody's questions. Yes, I think I got them all. Okay. So if anybody's got any last minute ones, put them in the chat. I'm answering one more here. This one is from Vivi. I think this is how you pronounce her name. This is a question: when does it end? And so I assume she means shadow work. When does it end? So my answer is one that people don't want to hear. Probably never. It probably never ends. But that doesn't mean you have to be doing it constantly every single day. Okay, so just remember that. You don't have to be constantly doing this. It's kind of like when you get on the path. It's like, when does witchcraft end? Never. You're a witch. You're on the path. So you're always like, are you ever going to get to a place where like, oh, I've achieved all I can in witchcraft? Probably not, right? So we're always on the path, and we're always learning, and we're always perfecting ourselves and moving forward. And the same thing goes for shadow work. We're probably always doing this kind of work when we get called here. So some, like I said, say this is the most authentic path to enlightenment. I don't like extreme language like that. I don't think it's the most authentic. I think it's a very authentic path. I think it's very accessible for people, which is why so many are drawn to it. And it is absolutely a path that leads towards enlightenment. But here's the deal, is if we don't do the work has to be done one way or the other. So what will happen is if we don't do this work in this life, we'll find is when we die and we pass through the veils, we will be faced by us, our true self. And our true self will not be the vision of what we were when we were alive if we haven't done any of this work. So what happens to some people who never touch any of this unconscious work is that they're faced by that reality when they cross through the veils, and it's very startling. And they have to spend time in the in-between worlds figuring that stuff out. So there are actually people who suspect that that's where the idea of purgatory comes from. It's not like this hellish place. It's a place where you got to go do the work that you didn't do during your life. Now, I don't know about you. I would rather do it here because I want a better experience when I cross through. I want to cross through and kind of go on to wherever the next place is and not stop here. So in that way, shadow work is the work of our life. It's the work of enlightenment. It's the work of spiritual evolution, and that never, ever ends. So again, spiraling back, that doesn't mean you're constantly immersed in it. You can't be. You can't do this hard work 24/7, day in and day out. And so what you do is you do some of it. You kind of on the path, just like you're on the path of witchcraft, and you're doing shadow work at regularly timed intervals, right? So maybe you're doing it once a month at the dark moon, or you're doing a prompt every week. And then perhaps you do that for several months, and then you're like, I need to take a break. and then you take a little break, and then you come back. Maybe you do energy work while you're taking your break, and then you come back. But it's not really there's not really ever going to be an end. And most of the people who I actually, let's back that up. I think there is an end, and I think the end is when we fully find that enlightenment. But I don't know that that's in this life. At least I'm pretty sure it's not in this life for me. I don't think I'm about to become an enlightened master or anything. So it's just constant. We're constantly evolving. We're constantly trying to achieve that enlightened state. But it won't really end until we get to that place where we ascend and we become that kind of enlightened master. Okay, so I hope that answered the question. Let me see if there's anything more in the chat that I'm not seeing. There's a lot here, so sometimes I'm going to miss some of these, and if I do, I will go back later and I'll answer anything I missed. Okay, so saying hello to everybody. I see a lot of people have joined us. And okay, so if you have any questions, you can still put them in. I'm just going to tell you last few minutes. I'm going to tell you about things that are coming up. And then that gives the people a chance to put in any last minute questions. Okay, so a lot of great things coming up. Next week, Ask Aislin, we're going to be talking about the throat chakra. This is a huge one for people. Our Shadow Seekers membership did a big deep dive into the throat a couple months ago. But this would be an episode where I'll just talk about the throat chakra, give people some ideas of how you can know whether your throat chakra needs some work or is properly functioning. And I'll give you some ideas of what to do to clear out blockages in the throat chakra. It's a big one for people because the throat is, we have a lot of blockages here because so many of us have to hide aspects of ourselves. We're not able to speak our truth all the time. And then so many of us also have difficult things to say to people. And opening up the throat chakra can help that. Okay, so that is next week. And then after that, we're like almost at Yule. So we're going to have an episode on winter solstice and Yule. And then we have a very special Yule ritual coming up this year. It's open to everyone. Everyone in our Shadow Seekers membership immediately gets a ticket to that. That's just part of their membership. But anybody who's not in Shadow Seekers, you'll be able to get a ticket by donation. We're going to be honoring Odin this year, and we're going to be doing the Wild Hunt. So if you've never done the Wild Hunt before, you do not want to miss this ritual. It's dark, it's cathartic, it's deep, it's going to get into shadow aspects, and you're just going to love it. So I'm going to build up anticipation for it because it's just a really fantastic ritual. But that is coming up on December 20th. So we're right at the time of the solstice. So look for more information about that. And then for those who have not joined our Shadow Seekers membership, we are still open for the next like a little over 24 hours. There's about one more day to go. We have a great offer right now, 14-day free trial of the membership. So if it's something that you've been interested in, doing shadow work at a deeper level, try it out. Try the trial out. See if it's for you, and then if it is, you can continue on with us. We're doing some great work coming up. We're actually getting into the third eye this month, and then after that, we're going to be connecting to the higher self. We're going to be looking at our astrological charts. We're going to look at kind of our destiny, so, some of the reasons that we're here incarnated in this plane right now. So many great things coming up, and it's just also a group of people who are doing shadow work and energy work at a deep level, and you don't even quite understand how priceless that is until you're in a group like that where everyone's doing it. But it's very, very, very comforting to know that there are others there to support you as well. So if you're interested, I'm going to drop a link right below this. There's, like I said, there's about, I think it's like 30 hours left to sign up, and we'd love to have you. Great time to try it because it is the 14-day trial, and I'm not sure we're going to offer that again. So this would be a good time to get in. All right, let me see if there's any other questions here. I don't see any. That doesn't mean they're not here because sometimes Facebook doesn't show them all to me. But if I missed anything, I will go back and I'll get these all later. And of course, if you're interested in the Shadow Seekers membership, check out for a link right below the video. All right, until next time, everybody. Blessed be.